So one day your neighbor who you chat with frequently, or maybe a work associate, or perhaps somebody at the gym, they change the conversation in a direction you never would have anticipated, and they suddenly say to you, what are your beliefs about God, and why do you believe what you believe about God? Now, this is a jolting question perhaps, and maybe you even consider it rude that this is a personal subject that you don't talk about. You know, we're all familiar with, you don't talk about religion and you don't talk about politics. But what would you say? What do you believe about God, and why do you believe what you believe about God? Now, of course, some of us are thinking, well, I don't believe anything about God because I don't believe in God at all. And then there's some of you that are maybe agnostic, and you're thinking, well, I don't know what I believe about God. That's why I'm an agnostic. I'm not sure. So what about the person that is an atheist? Okay, so the atheist is a position that says, no God. It's a strong statement, actually. It's not that I just don't believe about God. The person is saying with conviction, there is no God. So what is there to talk about? Well, how does the person that takes that position, how do they explain themselves? How do they explain human life? How do they explain life in the universe at all? How do they explain the universe? I mean, if you take the position there's no God, how did everything that is here get here, including the complexity of life forms? I mean, the options are pretty limited. You know, it's either everything came from nothing for no reason, or everything came from an intelligent designer who had purpose and plans for everything that this being created. Now you think, well, that's kind of a very limited approach to things, but is it really? I mean, we know that even if you take the Big Bang as something that's scientifically provable, the Big Bang pretty much clearly states that 13.5 billion years ago, there was no universe. Nothing existed. So nothing is nothing. You can't get something out of nothing. So it's a hard thing to explain. How did the complexity of life forms and the entire universe come out of nothing for no reason? I mean, let's look at it simplistically. If I were to, have a brand new Mercedes and I drive it up to you and you say, hey, where'd you get that from? And I say, well, a tornado went through a junkyard and out came this Mercedes. Well, you would think I was joking, and of course I would be, because that's ridiculous. No, whenever we see something that's complex, we know that somebody with great intelligence and purpose had to construct it. You said, but Randy, they're finding now that life can be done in a laboratory. Well, that only proves my point. If you can create life in a laboratory, which by the way they have not done yet, but even if they do, it just means that intelligent people, living people with brains and purpose, created life or duplicated life. And so the alternative to everything came from nothing for no reason is that there was an eternal first cause who is a person, who is brilliant, who is powerful, and who has a plan. Because that's what we see in living models. When we use these powers that we have called observation and reason, this is the conclusion we come to. So what is the reason then behind the thought? So if I ask the atheist or the agnostic, why don't they believe what they say they don't believe, it would be interesting to hear, because science doesn't really support those positions. But reason and observation does support the notion of an intelligent designer creator. Let me share a verse from you from the New Testament. And this is a rather long one, so you'll have to be patient with me. It's in Romans chapter 1, verse 19 through 22. It says, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. It's talking about humanity. It says God made it plain to them for what can be known about Him. For since creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without an excuse. This is saying that when a human being looks at all of creation and all of its complexity, we know that somebody intelligent and purposeful had to have created it. There had to be an eternal first cause. And I know what some of you are thinking, but where did God come from? Think about it. Someone had to be here forever. Look in the mirror. You're here. You came from somewhere. And that which is not living doesn't produce that which is living, observation and reason once again. So there had to be an eternal first cause. So this says that when we look at creation, God says we know He's there. And we know a lot about Him. By looking at creation and looking at human beings in particular, we can see, for example, that God had to be superior, the Creator had to be superior to the creation. Therefore, He's got mind, reason, emotions, will, just like we do. And we know that He would have to be better than the best human being, because to be evil is a negative, destructive way of living. So the most intelligent person would be the most righteous, the most kind, the most compassionate. Just by observation and reason, we could see that our Creator would be like one person that's walked across the scene in human history. That person's called Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus called the Christ. It goes on to say this in the same passage. It says, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God nor gave thanks to Him, but their thinking became futile, empty, useless. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools." So it's saying that human beings all know intuitively that God is there. We know what He's like. We know that He's good. We know that He's supreme. We know that He's a designer with purpose. But we can choose to lie to ourselves and say, God doesn't exist, or He's there, but I don't know what He's like. But the truth of the matter seems to be, it's based on what our interest level really is. So it seems like the real truth, maybe the uncomfortable truth for us, is that we make a choice. It's either a choice based on observation and reason, which logically leads to an eternal, purposeful, beautiful Creator, or we make a choice that we want to be what we call, or at least what we think is freedom, to be free from this Creator. I hope this gives you something to think about, and that you'll share it with someone that you can talk about it with.